Hello again, world, and this time making a video to do a book review of Mindstar Rising, Peter F. Hamilton's first book. I'm almost certain of it. It's his first book. And I read it because I read a lot of Peter F. Hamilton. I've read the Void trilogy. I've read the Night's Dawn trilogy. I've read the Commonwealth saga. I've read a lot of his stuff, and he's easily one of my favorite authors I've ever read, and I've talked about it a number of times in all the reviews that I do on him. It's just because he's able to convey really complex ideas clearly, So if you want like a really vividly imagined world, he excels at that, but it's not like you need to have a doctorate to be able to understand what it is that he's trying to get across. I've always liked that style. And I'm writing my own book as well. I'm doing like a sci-fi fantasy thing, and you're always looking for inspiration. And I thought it would be really interesting to check out the first book that Peter F. Hamilton ever wrote, because wouldn't it be interesting to see how his style has evolved since the beginning? You wonder, does an author stay static? Does he kind of have that style and then he sticks with it? Does he change? And it's been really, really interesting to read the book with that in mind, knowing that it was his first effort. And I thought, it was tons of surprises. I thought in reading the book, I was like, oh, this will probably be, a shadow of the complexity that he has in his later books and everything like that. And I'll get to see how he developed. But to be completely honest, I actually found when I started this book and I got into it, it's almost like this book has more complexity. Correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody could argue the other side of that. But I was blown away that it wasn't quite as clear. And then I realized maybe that is what has developed in his style. Is to begin with, these are kind of like whodunit spy novels, but with a sci-fi backdrop put to them. And because of that, they've got really snaking, twisted storyline, a really snaking, twisted storyline that you're making your way through. Where with the grand space operas that you read in something like the Night's Dawn trilogy or the Commonwealth saga, there's more just individual storylines that are occurring that add to the complexity. But in each storyline, they're pretty easy to follow. This person has a pretty clear-cut goal. This person has a pretty clear-cut goal. And they're not snaking all over the place. Their complexity is just in how they overlap with each other and everything like that. Whereas reading this book, I was like, oh, this is all over the place. But it was really, really fascinating for that reason. And for a first effort, it was definitely humbling, where I thought, maybe his vocabulary developed, maybe his just like generally I don't know, all the things that you expect in the actual like functional writing of the novel would have to come a long way. But I'm pretty sure this guy came out of the womb knowing how to describe every single architectural style in the world, and knowing like 70 different types of plants and trees, and just the vocab was not lacking. Again, the vocab might have been actually, if not as complex, more complex than I've read in his other books, and so that was a real trip as well. Where this book, I can say, after reading it, could have been the third or fourth book he wrote when you judge it for just like the maturity of the style and the way that it's written. And that was very surprising. I definitely, like I say, humbled for my own writing, where I think a lot how this is my first book. There's going to be a lot that changes and develops over the course of the time that I continue to write, but I see that your first effort should not lack in quality as compared to your umpteenth effort down the line. It can be just as good if you really care about it. I think one of Bram Stoker's first books was Dracula, so that's another example of like your first can be your best, apparently. So you should bear that in mind when you're writing. Really, really good. And I enjoyed the like I say, if you want to talk about the plot a little bit, I enjoyed the fact that it was the kind of this whodunit. You got Mendel. Greg Mandel, who is he's psychic, basically. The title Mindstar Rising, which initially when I looked at that, I was like, oh god, another rising title. But then the book was written in 1993, so I feel like Peter F. Hamilton beat everyone to using rising in his title. He did it first. It's not like Jupiter Ascending and Batman Rising and all the Dark Knight Rising and all these different titles that have rising in them right now. but yeah, it was really cool. I enjoyed the idea of him. Like I said, he's a psychic, and he comes from, it's called Mindstar program, where there were all these guys, you got these glands put into them that would allow them to be psychic. And I like the way in which he deals with the psychic aspect, because it's not like a direct reading of someone's mind when he uses this ability. It's more intuitive than that. He sees and feels people's emotions in a more abstract way, but he's able to read it as though they were actually, he could hear their thoughts. And it's interesting because he discusses the rest of the world in relation to how they see psychics, and they really believe that when a psychic is around them, that they're able to literally read their mind, but they're more looking for emotional responses. They're like a lie detector test, like he'll say a word to someone, like an emotionally laden word, and it's how they kind of emotionally respond to it that will indicate to him what it is that's going on. And that was great. He's a really good hero. He's a great hero, good starting hero for this character. And I have to say, other things to note, not a terribly flawed hero. Like if you want a guy that seems almost infallible, morally, physically, this guy's just great. He's kind of haunted by his past in the way that he's been involved with the military, but that isn't even really a weakness. It just makes him more badass. And so what else? Other aspects of it that I enjoyed in regards to the psychic attribute was that I think, lots of authors have said this, you have to be careful when you introduce an aspect like a psychic ability or any sort of magical power where you don't overwhelm the story with that ability, because, if they have infinite ability to like see into the future or read people's minds, then where really is the conflict of the book going to come from? And so kind of matching that, or, getting that tuned in this story, is that whenever you use this thing, whenever you use this psychic ability, this gland, that you get a sort of like a neurohormone hangover. And so its use always has a cost, and the degree to which you use it has an additional cost. So if you used it for a little bit, you get a mild hangover. If you used it for a long period of time, it'll give you a severe hangover. And then there's just the potency of it, where if he uses it in a real mild way just to read one person, again, that has its own like trade-off. But if he wants to, he can just like dump these hormones from the gland into his brain, and then it like broadens his perspective to an incredible level. But then that, of course, has a really severe cost, where he's like getting bleeding noses and like passing out if he pushes himself that far with it. And I really enjoyed that. I thought that really balanced the ability throughout the story, so it just didn't make him absolutely unbeatable, and then because of that, the story less interesting, because he has a few weaknesses, it means he has to be intelligent. It means that he has to be creative in the problems that come up for him. And it makes him a better hero, because he's multifaceted. He's an onion. He has layers. So he is a great hero. The storyline is a sort of murder whodunit is really interesting. And also, when you go back and you read this book, it's in 1993. I like reading sci-fi that's kind of like just recently been released, because when you do that, you get a sense of, especially from Peter F. Hamilton, he looks at the recent research and then is able to kind of project from that research how things might be in the future. Whereas this one being written in 1993 is a cool kind of look back, where the future that you see in this is not so distant, and it relates to when he was writing this book back at that time. And so it's cool to see how he envisioned a future at that point. That was another interesting aspect of it. And it's got some great storytelling elements, where you've got like this super crazy company that's kind of like a Compu Global Megamart, that kind of thing, where they're like super billionaires, and they've had something go wrong with one of their projects, and they're losing tons of money. So they enlist him to be able to kind of like root through their company and find out what it is that was going on, who has caused this loss of money or this like leak in the business. And then from there, greater problems arise, and you have this kind of like murder mystery that's going on. I guess I keep calling it a murder mystery or a whodunit. I guess I just mean because it's like a spy novel. It's not necessarily who murdered who. It's kind of like there's these shadow corporations and what are their motives and stuff like that. But great, really, really interesting book. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and a real statement of what somebody's style can be like when they initially start writing. You don't need to start and need to improve a great deal. You could start writing, and if you put in the effort, you could write an absolutely amazing book. And so I just finished the first one. That's Mindstar Rising, and now I'm going to start the second one, which is A Quantum Murder. Badass title, very cool. And I'll be getting up another review of that, and that'll be cool too, because I believe that's his second book that he wrote. So I wonder, how the characters will have evolved and continued from this. But it's really good. I strongly recommend it. Usual other strengths that you see much later in his career are all there. The vivid environments, to talk about something I've talked about before, that when he puts a sort of futuristic element into the society that he's discussing, one of his other strengths is that he's able to show you or discuss in greater depth how a technological change would then have a social change within a society, and it's not just some cool thing, but then it doesn't really seem to interact with the rest of society at all. Everything impacts everything in the story, and it kind of makes for a more believable world that you're reading about. So that's that. Yeah, if you enjoy the review, please do like, subscribe, share, comment, recommend books to me. I've had some great books recommended so far because I'm making these videos, so I really appreciate that. And there'll be more videos to come, and like I like to say, until we meet again next time, world, thanks for tripping with Dave. Ciao for now. Peace.